Hi everyone. So strength training can certainly feel overwhelming. Without a clear understanding of what to do or why you're doing it, you might not even start, or you'll keep bouncing around between programs and you'll spin your wheels and you'll get frustrated. So in this video, I'm going to break down the components of strength training so that you can stop guessing and start training with confidence. When you finish this video, you'll not only be able to follow a program, but you'll also be able to understand it. So let's start with the basics. These are the building blocks of strength training. Every time that you do a workout, all this is called is a training day. So the training day is a part of what's called a training split, which is simply how your workouts are going to be organized over the course of a week. The week of training fits into what's called a training block, and this usually lasts 3 to 6 weeks. So you can think about it like this. Training day is the smallest unit, a training day is a part of a training week, and a training week is a part of a training block. Now, each day is made up of exercises, and all of these exercises have some key components. So let's go ahead and get into that. These key components include exercise selection. This is what you are actually doing. They include repetitions, how many times you actually do something. Sets, which is how many rounds you actually repeat. Load, which is how much weight you're using. And rest is just how long you wait in between your sets. So let's say that you did 10 bicep curls, that's 10 repetitions. If you rest 60 seconds and do that again, that's 2 sets of 10. You can also combine exercises, have them go back to back. For example, if you did a curl, followed immediately by a tricep extension, now that's what's called a superset. Now let's zoom out and talk about your training week. This is usually called the training split. Your training split determines the focus of each training day. Now, some common examples include full body training. This works every muscle in one session. It's really great for beginners. You have upper and lower training splits. One day is an upper body focus. The next day is a lower body training focus. This is more common for intermediates. And then a more advanced training split, if you've been doing this for a while, it'd be something like a push, a squat, a pull, and a hinge. We'll talk about what that means later. Each day has a focused movement pattern or sometimes a focused muscle group. So why do we actually split this up like this? The more advanced that you get, the more training volume that you can handle. So if you've ever done a full leg day after a long break from training, or if you haven't been training, you're probably very, very sore. The more advanced you are, the more volume you can handle. So what's volume? Well, volume is a really key and important component in strength training. It's just calculated by the number of sets that you do times the reps that you do times the load. So if you curl 10 pounds for 10 repetitions, and you just do one set, that's 10 times 10, that's 100 pounds of training volume. Usually increased training volume results in more gains over time, whether that's strength or muscle growth. All right, so now strength training exercises fall into basic movement patterns. You have your what's called vertical push patterns. Vertical push is just when you push weight over your head. For example, an overhead press, these exercises work your shoulders and your triceps. Next is a vertical pull. This is when you're just pulling weight down, pulling it vertically. Think a lat pull down, and it doesn't just have to be pulling weight down, it could be pulling yourself down. So a chin up is another example. This works your back and biceps. Then you have your horizontal push variations. That's when you're just pushing weight out. So again, you could push yourself. That's, for example, a push-up or a bench press if you're moving weight, a dumbbell press too. This works your chest, shoulders, and triceps. Then you have your horizontal pull exercises. That's just pulling weight inward, so pulling weight in towards you. Those are all of your rowing variations. These work your back and your biceps. Then for lower body, you have squat patterns. These are more knee dominant, means you're bending more at your legs. Examples are things like your back squats and your goblet squats. These tend to work your quadriceps, so the front of your legs, along with your glutes. The other lower body pattern is your hinge. These are more hip dominant, means your hips are going back further. You might bend your legs slightly. The squat and the hinge actually are kind of related. More leg bend is more squat, less leg bend is more hinge. Hips going backwards more is more hinge. So these are things like your deadlifts, your Romanian deadlifts. These work your glutes, but also your hamstrings as well. So the back of your legs. And then another category is going to be carries. Carries are just when you're holding weight for a prolonged period of time. A farmer's walk is a perfect example of a carry. Now, if you are a beginner and you're putting together a full body routine, you'll pick something from each of those movement categories to fill in your actual training day. If you are an intermediate, you'll probably have a upper lower split, which means that one day is more of your push and pull exercises, and then the other day is your squat and hinge exercises. Then if you are advanced, you'll break that down even further. So you're just spreading these apart, okay? Day 1 might be a push day. Day 2 might be a squat day. Day 3 might be a pull day. And day 4 might be more of your hinge-based day. Now, this doesn't tell the entire story of exercises. Yes, it's a really, really good starting point. But we also have exercises that are categorized by how many joints are involved. So a single joint exercise, so for example, a curl is just flexion at the elbow, okay? It's just working one joint. It's just working one joint and it's just working one muscle, so your biceps. Your multi-joint exercises have multiple joints involved. So for example, if you're doing a row, you are flexing at your elbow, but also extending at your shoulder. So multiple joints are involved and multiple muscles are involved. If you're doing a leg extension machine, that's just a leg extension. That's it. That's working your quadriceps. And while a squat also extends at your legs, it also extends at your hips. It's multi-joint. We can typically, and actually not typically, we can always go heavier on our multi-joint exercises compared to our single joint exercises. So that made up your training split, your week, but we also want to talk about your training blocks. So training blocks usually last 3 to 6 weeks. During that time period, exercises typically stay the same so your body can adapt. Variety is important, but we don't want to introduce too much variety too quickly. Throughout that training block though, it's possible that your reps and then subsequently your weight will change. So for example, in a training block, let's say it's a 4-week training block, maybe week 1, your exercises are 12 reps, week 2, they're 10, week 3, they're 8, week 4, they're 6. Here's an important concept. So as reps go down, weight goes up. So for example, if I were to bench 100 pounds for 3 sets of 12, and then my next training week, I'm still doing a bench press, but I'm doing 3 sets of 10, I'm going to be able to lift heavier. Reps are lower, weight can go up. So that's a very important relationship. The higher the reps, the lighter the weight, the lower the reps, the heavier the weight. So what we'll do today is wrap up with the 4 absolutely most important training principles. A lot of people argue over methods of training, but all effective methods of training apply these principles. And the first principle is called specificity. It just means that you get good at what you do. So if you wanted to get strong, a mismatch would be swimming. So sometimes people that are novice to exercise will ask me, is swimming a good form of strength training? So it's not. That's more of an aerobic form of activity. Just like if I wanted to get more aerobically fit, I would run. I wouldn't necessarily be doing a bench press or something. But that actually leads to another important part. If you want to get good at a specific strength training movement, you have to do it. That's probably very intuitive. If I want to get better at bench press, I have to bench press. You've probably seen that in sports. If you want to get better at basketball, you got to play basketball. The next important concept is called individualization. Your plan needs to fit you, okay? There's a number of different things. The 2 things that pop out to me immediately are training status and then if you have any joint injuries. So for example, beginners shouldn't necessarily start out with complex barbell lifts. I wouldn't program in a conventional deadlift for somebody that's never done strength training before. They need to master some prerequisite movements. I wouldn't program a back squat in for a novice. They need to master a goblet squat. I wouldn't do a conventional deadlift. They need to probably master a dumbbell deadlift. Additionally, if you have limitations or past injuries, your exercise selection should reflect that. Next is progressive overload. This is an important concept. So to grow muscle or to gain strength, your body needs a new challenge. The most common way to introduce a new challenge is by adding weight. But you can also introduce progressive overload by adding more reps, by adding sets. You can do more sessions per week. You can do more exercises within those sessions. And then another one is changing the exercise completely. This is actually a really great thing to do once you've hit a plateau. So let's go back to our example with overall just training volume, because this is super important. It's a good way to know if you are applying progressive overload. So let's say that somebody was doing 3 sets of 10 of a curl with 10 pounds. That's 3 times 10 times 10, that's 300 pounds of volume. If they came back 6 months later and they said, I'm doing 3 sets of 10 with 10 pounds, it's the same amount of volume. They haven't applied progressive overload. But if they did 6 months later, 3 times 10 with 20 pounds, they've now done 600 pounds of training volume, okay? That's overload, and that's what drives change. And then lastly, you have adaptation. So your body responds to overload by changing. So for example, this is important. If your goal is max strength, you're going to need to lift heavier weight. So usually people that are training for strength are lifting in rep ranges of 6 or lower. There's carryover to higher. If you're lifting with 12 reps, you'll still get stronger. If your goal though is muscle strength, you're probably going to be living in that 6 to 15 rep range. And if you're aiming for muscular endurance, you're probably going to be doing 15 plus repetitions. Each of these goals that you have probably has a more ideal rep range. And again, because the rep range is different, if you're doing lighter reps, you'll go heavier weight, you'll need more rest time between sets. This also impacts total volume. So all things equal, a strength training routine is probably gonna have less volume than a routine geared towards muscle growth, but the principles still stay the same. If you wanna get stronger, we need more training volume. If you want bigger muscles, you're gonna need more training volume. All right, so I hope that this is helpful. Strength training doesn't need to feel mysterious. Now that you understand the structure and the patterns, but also the principles behind it, you're in a better position to train intelligently. If you found this video helpful, please consider giving this a like, dropping a comment, and please subscribe so you can be alerted when I drop new videos, whether they're educational or if they're a fully filmed routine that you can work along with. Happy training. Thanks for watching.